Hey guys, we're back in the workshop and today I've got a really cool project for you because we are building a camp knife. Because I will go to a camping trip that goes around 3 days and we are out in the woods and I want to build a fitting knife for that. Before I want to start working on the knife, I have to draw down a design. I've already got something in my head, but I have to bring it to the paper. So actually I just wanted to make just one design, but I actually came up with 2 designs. And because I want to test out those knives, I thought why not make both and test them and see how they compare, which is practical. Is a bigger knife practical and maybe you don't need an axe or something like that, or do you need maybe a smaller knife and also a camping axe? So I just want to make 2, and in the end of the video you actually see how I make both of these knives. So I cut out the template of the knife and then I've scribed it onto the steel and I'm fixing it down to the steel with some magnets and then just draw it down with the Sharpie. And today I didn't show you how I profiled them because I did a lot of videos where I just profiled the steel and it's actually a really easy task. But today I wanted to show you how I make the sharpening choil and also how I drill out those holes. The 2 knives are now profiled and I've also scribed some lines and the holes are also done, so I can now start with the preheat treatment grind on these knives, so we have to jump to the grinding room. Now that I'm in the grinding room, the big knife is actually quite a challenge to grind. First of all, it's a big knife and then we have a swooping recurve in the blade, so you have to grind over the corner of your belt grinder, especially with a flat platen. And if you're interested on how to grind a recurve, I've just made a video on the karambit, so if you want to check that out, I'm going to a deeper dive in how to grind those recurve blades. So as a small recap of that video, you have to grind over the corner of the belt so you don't get any kind of belt bite. So I have the pressure on my right or left hand depending on the side that I'm grinding, and then I'm going to feather everything in with the belt. The smaller knife was way easier to grind than the bigger knife, but I'm also working on a step-by-step tutorial on how to grind a bevel and how to build a whole knife, and you get everything step by step, but it will take some time because I have to plan everything out. Heat treating 80 CRV is actually quite easy and you don't need a heat treating kiln. It's a really nice starting steel, so you can also do it in a forge or in a fire. I have also made a video where I show you how to heat treat a knife in a forge. Of course, it's not as exact as a heat treating kiln. So while the knives are tempering, I can start working on the handle because I want to glue up some liners to the thicker piece of G10. So I would recommend always using a metal cutting bandsaw for cutting out G10, because I had a wood cutting bandsaw and it was just tearing apart my bandsawing blades, and those metal cutting bandsaws, like I have this Milwaukee portable bandsaw on a vise, they just cut G10 much nicer and much longer, and it's just a pleasure to cut with them instead of wood cutting blades. So after I'm done cutting out the handle scales, I have sandblasted them, cleaned them up with some acetone so I don't have any kind of oil stains on them, and then I've mixed up some 24-hour epoxy. I'm using G-Flex, and I've also mixed in some black pigment, so if there are any tiny gaps or so, you don't see them in the end because we are working with black G10, and then I'm just clamping them and let them cure for 24 hours. The 2 knives are now hardened and tempered, so now I can jump to my grinding room and finish up those grinds. So when you finish grinding your knives, you have to be really carefully so you don't blow out your temper on the knives,
and that means you overheat your knife during the grinding, and that can happen really quickly. So what I like to do to prevent that, I'm using fresh belts, a little bit less pressure, also less speed on the belt grinder, so I take it quite slowly, and then I'm always cooling down my knife, maybe after a half pass or a full pass, depending on the size of the knife. And as you may see, I'm using the work rest as a stabilization during grinding, and I get better results, but the downside is those hot sparks from the 80 CRV, they're really nasty, and I often have some burn marks on my fingers because those sparks are super hot. And to finish up the grind, I changed out my flat platen to my rotary platen, and the rotary platen helps me to add a convex edge to the knife, which then gives me a really nice stable edge in the end, especially for a chopping knife, and I'm really looking forward to testing out these knives out in the forest.
Now that the grind on the bevels is finished, I can start working on these handle scales. The glue is already set, so now I can start working on these.
So when I'm working on the handle scales, I always like to clamp them together so I can drill through both scales at the same time. And then I'm just going to reset the holes so I can fit in some screws. Now I can put the handle scales together and profile the handles on the belt grinder, and it's always super satisfying to watch how the belt grinder makes quick work of removing the G10. And I don't want to talk too much now because I just want to show you that montage of how I rock pattern it, and if you're interested in it, I have also made a full dedicated video about how I rock pattern my knives.
So the handles of the knives are done, and I've also sandblasted the knives because now that the handles are done, I've also quickly sandblasted those knives, and now I will apply the acid stonewash finish. And if you're interested in how I make my stonewash finish, I've already got a whole video about that, so you just have to click somewhere up here and you will find the whole video about how to stonewash your knife. The knives are now done, but I want to transport them safely, so I want to make some Kydexsheaths for them.
So I like to tape up my knives for the Kydexsheath so you give the blade a little bit of room, so if there is any kind of dirt or any kind of stuff, you don't scratch up your knife that quickly. And the Kukri was actually really tricky because of the recurve, because if you just draw the knife out straight out of the sheath, you would just scratch up the knife really badly, and therefore I had to come up with an idea. The idea was I had add some cardboard to the spine of the knife, and that just gives me some room, so later on you will see how I will open up the sheath and I can draw the knife from the spine actually of the sheath out, and I don't draw it straight out of the sheath. And before I hear it in the comments, yes, I've used way too much Kydex on the pancake sheath, and I'm apologizing for that because I don't often working with pancake sheath. I'm always working with taco style sheaths, and therefore I used way too much material, and next time I will do it better. And again, I'm using the same bandsaw as cutting out the G10 for the Kydex, so this portable bandsaw is just really nice tool, and I can always recommend it for using it. And also, if you're interested in how to build a full Kydexsheath, I've also made a full dedicated video where I'm just talking Kydexsheath, so you can also check that out. I'm now using the heat gun to just relieve some of the Kydex, open up just a little bit, and also give me a thumb rest for the sheaths. And here you can see how I'm opening the sheath up for the Kukri. It comes up from the spine of the blade.
Now that I have the Kydexsheaths done, I'm ready to take them onto the hiking trip and test out these knives. So guys, I'm back now from the camping trip, and it was a lot of fun, especially testing out the Kukri. This knife I've also tested, but I've also noticed it is way too thick. Like, this knife is 5.5 millimeters, which is like, you can use it as a breaching tool kind of. For the big Kukri, it worked really fantastically. The chopping power in it was just amazing, going through all the wood and doing all that kind of work So if I could decide which knife I would take onto a camping trip, I would probably use this bigger knife, because maybe then I could get away with just carrying this knife, because you can still do some final detail and all that kind of stuff, like some feather sticks and all that kind of stuff, and you still can do the toning like an axe. Of course, it won't replace like a full build axe, but if you just want to carry one tool, this knife is really amazing for it. So what I will probably do is I will revisit this knife and maybe make it out of a thinner stock, maybe 3.5 millimeters or so. I've already got some steel in my head that I can use for that. This knife in this steel size is amazing, and it was such an amazing chopper. And if you enjoyed this kind of video, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, write a comment for the algorithm god, and we'll see us next Friday. Whoop, 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 whoop.